Well, good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 21st of December, the beginning of the winter solstice. This is my favourite time of the year. This is the shortest day of the year, and we will be spending 3 days in this position, and because solstice literally means sun stop, solstice. And after that, every day is getting longer by about a minute and a half. And so you don't tend to notice it until we get about the middle of January, but they're getting longer. So once we're through these 3 days, wow, we'll be doing okay. Anyway, so this evening what I wanted to talk to you about is the situation in France, and President Emanuel Macron is in pretty rough shape right now. And to put this into context, this is the following up on the ongoing yellow jacket or the Gilets jaunes protest in France, which is now spreading to Belgium and the Netherlands, and some important things have been taking place. It's move over yellow vest, and in come the blue vests. Now, there's been a few unfortunate things in this succession of events, and of course initially Macron called the protesters thugs, and the police went at this with great vigour to shut down the yellow vest protests. They basically exhausted the police. They turned out some 89,000 police officers. So after making those comments, it came out that 70%, more than 70% of the French population were in support of the Yellow Vest movement, and then Macron came out with that pathetic speech from, I believe it was the Palace of Versailles, at one of the king's writing desks, maybe Louis XIV. Anyway, he was basically surrounded by gold and opulence, and trying to come across as a commoner who felt the pain of the common people. The public didn't take too well to this, and the protest continued. And then, of course, we had that the awful terrorist attack, and Macron's approval rating has absolutely plummeted to around 20%, and this is actually lower than Monsieur Hollande, and he was actually one of the least liked French presidents. So Macron is really struggling with basically his whole presidency within France. So now these negotiations with the police have been a bit testy, because just before all this happened, the French government cut the funding to the French police by 62 million euros. And so this was not a good move, as it turns out. The police are not very happy about the whole thing. And on top of that, the French government have recently approved a housing project for migrants and immigrants, and this is a 1.6 million euros. Okay, so I'm sure you can see that the police are pretty testy about that they have had their budget cut by 62 million euros, and here is the government forking out 1.6 billion euros to build a housing project. And so here they are, the police are exhausted, they're at their wits' end, and of course what this does indicate is just the absolute massive size of the Yellow Vest protests. And this has been stewing for a long time. Scholars have been warning about this, because under globalization what has happened is all of the factory work has been outsourced into third world countries, and in have moved the bankers and the investors and those kind of people, and so there's been a huge gentrification in some of these central regions. Housing has become unaffordable, and so these people who couldn't afford to live in the city have now moved out into the urban areas and into the rural areas where there is less work. The pay is not so great, and so to be hit now with a gas tax and increasing cost of living has just become untenable. And the government's handling of this, of course, is absolutely atrocious. They have really not taken into account or into consideration the true feelings of the people. And I've got another video coming up, and I'm going to tackle this blindness, not necessarily with the Paris situation or the French situation, but right here in Canada. And it explains why so many of these things unfold as they do. Anyway, I've got a couple of things on the computer I want to show you, so let's flip over to them right now, and we'll talk to you in a minute. Okay, here we go. So here we are, the Daily Express. France, chaos. Now blue vest protesters cause chaos as Macron's protests spiral. Air passengers have been hit by delays in Paris as French police slowed down passport controls in a protest over overtime pay. In the blue vest protest, the police caused long queues of waiting passengers at Charles de Gaulle Airport after deliberately dragging their heels at passport check-in. Airport officials said the slowdown was currently only hitting Terminal 1, adding that police were working but taking their time with deep checks of passengers. Elsewhere in Paris, some police stations were responding only to emergencies as police continued to negotiate with the government for extra cash for working additional hours at the recent Yellow Vest protests. The action comes as yet another blow to President Emanuel Macron following 5 consecutive weekends of disruptive and often violent Yellow Vest protests across France. Scores of police officers have been injured since the citizen-driven Yellow Vest movement was launched in mid-November, most in violent clashes with anti-government protesters. Police unions have denounced working conditions and complained about what they said were strained resources as officers have been sent in to clear roadblocks and restrain violent thugs who had joined the street demonstrations to stir chaos and provoke police. And this just shows you how far the police have been stretched. Furthermore, the Alliance Police Union called on police officers across France to handle only emergencies amid negotiations with the Interior Ministry. The French government proposed giving €300 bonuses to officers deployed to the protests by the Yellow Vest movements after French President Emmanuel Macron committed to the idea of protest duty pay earlier this month. However, police union representatives want more cash along with additional compensation for years of overtime duty never paid out. As France's Interior Ministry said on Wednesday that negotiations and unions are trying to find a settlement plan. But years of overtime pay never given to police officers. And this could not come at a worse time for Emmanuel Macron. He needs his police now. And here is the European Union Times. 11 French generals warn Macron he faces arrest for treason over UN migration pact. General Antoine Martinez has written the letter signed by 10 other generals, an admiral and a colonel, and also includes former French Minister of Defense Charles Millon. They've given strong warning that Macron's signing the UN Global Migration Pact strips France of even more sovereignty, providing an additional reason for an already battered people to revolt. The highly decorated military co-signees assert that the beleaguered Macron is guilty of a denial of democracy or treason against the nation for signing the Migration Pact without putting it to the people. The French state is late in coming to realise the impossibility of integrating too many people, in addition to totally different cultures who have regrouped in the last 40 years in areas that no longer submit to the laws of the Republic. The letter advises also saying that mass immigration is erasing France's civilizational landmarks. The pact, which has been protested in the Yellow Vest demonstrations in 5 countries, was signed by 164 nations, most against the will of the citizens, as stated in dozens of country-specific petitions on Monday in Marrakesh. So, Macron is in trouble. I think you will see Macron fall. I think he will step down as president of France and leave his prime minister to take over, and the potential of an early election, because this man is a weakling. He's soft and he has no idea how to lead a country. And when you look at his history, he has basically had the gilded life, and he has fallen into jobs even at the IMF and the World Bank. I mean, here is a man with literally no experience getting some of the top jobs instantly. I mean, come on, give me a break. And so this is why these protests are not going to stop. So as you can see, things are not looking very good for Emmanuel Macron at all. And we will be watching this story extremely closely. I think it's interesting that the generals are warning Macron that he could be tried for treason over the UN Migrant Act. So that there are many things unfolding simultaneously in Europe right now, and I think that this is going to lead to an extremely exciting and eventful 2019. Okay, so this tomorrow is my last day of work for a week. I've got a vacation coming up, and so I'll be doing several videos. Certainly among them will be my top 10 predictions for the coming year. So please let me thank you all for joining me, and if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe below. Press that big red button. It really helps when you do, and we will talk to you very soon. You take care now. Have a great evening. See ya. Bye now.